Where can I buy admission tickets? A practical phrase used to find the ticket counter for an attraction. Where can I buy admission tickets? Where can I buy admission tickets? I asked a turtle carrying a ribbon of tickets. What time does the museum open? A practical phrase used to ask when a museum opens to visitors. What time does the museum open? What time does the museum open? I asked while the museum doors stretched and yawned. What time does it close? A practical phrase used to ask when an attraction closes. What time does it close? What time does it close? I asked as the museum clock put on pajamas. Is photography allowed? A practical phrase used to check whether photographs may be taken. Is photography allowed? Is photography allowed? I asked while my camera raised its hand politely. Can I use a flash? A practical phrase used to check whether flash photography is permitted. Can I use a flash? Can I use a flash? I asked as the camera put sunglasses on a marble statue. Is there a guided tour in English? A practical phrase used to ask whether an English language guided tour is available. Is there a guided tour in English? Is there a guided tour in English? I asked a parrot guide holding a tiny umbrella. How long does the tour take? A practical phrase used to ask about the duration of a tour. How long does the tour take? How long does the tour take? I asked while the tour bus packed a very large lunch. Where does the tour start? A practical phrase used to find the meeting point for a tour. Where does the tour start? Where does the tour start? I asked as a statue pointed in 4 directions at once. Do I need to book in advance? A practical phrase used to check whether advance booking is required. Do I need to book in advance? Do I need to book in advance? I asked while a calendar reserved its own chair. Are there any tickets left? A practical phrase used to ask whether tickets are still available. Are there any tickets left? Are there any tickets left? I asked as 2 shy tickets peeked from a drawer. Is there an audio guide? A practical phrase used to ask whether an audio guide is available. Is there an audio guide? Is there an audio guide? I asked while headphones whispered to a dinosaur statue. Could I have a map? A practical phrase used to request a visitor map of an attraction. Could I have a map? Could I have a map? I asked as the map folded itself into a swan. Which attraction is the most popular? A practical phrase used to ask which local attraction receives the most visitors. Which attraction is the most popular? Which attraction is the most popular? I asked while a giant teapot posed for cameras. Is there a good viewpoint nearby? A practical phrase used to find a nearby place with a good view. Is there a good viewpoint nearby? Is there a good viewpoint nearby? I asked as the hill raised a tiny balcony. Could you take a photo of us? A practical phrase used to politely ask someone to photograph your group. Could you take a photo of us? Could you take a photo of us? I asked as a giraffe quietly joined the pose. When is the next performance? A practical phrase used to ask when the next show or performance begins. When is the next performance? When is the next performance? I asked while the theater curtains practiced a dance. Is this included in the ticket? A practical phrase used to check whether an activity is covered by the admission ticket. Is this included in the ticket? Is this included in the ticket? I asked while a tiny boat tried to fit into the ticket's pocket. Are there any student discounts? A practical phrase used to ask whether students receive a lower admission price. Are there any student discounts? Are there any student discounts? I asked as my backpack proudly presented a tiny graduation cap. Where is the souvenir shop? A practical phrase used to find the shop that sells souvenirs. Where is the souvenir shop? Where is the souvenir shop? I asked while refrigerator magnets formed a trail. Could you recommend a quiet place to visit? A practical phrase used to ask for a calm and less crowded attraction. Could you recommend a quiet place to visit? Could you recommend a quiet place to visit? I asked an owl beside a garden where flowers whispered.